Hello everyone, welcome back to our Pinnacle 21 webinar series. This webinar is prepared for those of you who is designing study data collection process or converting raw study data to standardized SDTM format. Specifically, it's about implementation metrics across the industry to understand utilization of CDISC Controlled Terminology and its extension for study-specific needs. My name is Sergey Sirichenko. I'm co-founder of Pinnacle 21 and a director of consultative services at Pinnacle 21. I specialized in standards engineering and data quality with focus on regulatory compliance. I also work with FDA to help them with implementation of Pinnacle 21 Enterprise validation solutions for upcoming submissions. If you have any questions during this presentation, just click on chat bubble icon in the questions tab, and I will answer as many as possible at the end of my webinar. Over the next 40 minutes, I will cover the following topics. First, I will do an announcement about Pinnacle 21 merging CERTARA. As moving to a major part of my presentation, I will explain a need for industry metrics for implementation of CDISC extensible control terminology. I will talk about methodology of our research. I will show and discuss our findings. And finally, I will summarize it before moving to your questions. Let's start with the big news happened a couple months ago. In August of this year, exactly on the day of Pinnacle 21 10 years anniversary, we agreed to merge CERTARA and finalize the process just a month ago. I would like to explain why and what it means for you. I think all you know Max Kanevsky on the left, a founder of Pinnacle 21. And gentleman on the right is Bill Ferry, CEO of CERTARA. So, a little bit about CERTARA for Pinnacle 21 users. CERTARA is a technology company just as Pinnacle 21. They focus on the area called biosimulation. They also work a lot in regulatory science and market access segments. The company has about 1,000 employees across 35 locations. Most of them are concentrated in US and Europe, but they have representation everywhere, including Japan, China, India, and Australia. This is a real global company. What is interesting is that over 30% of CERTARA employees are scientists, folks with PhD, pharm, or medical degrees. And from the next few slides, you will understand why. If you even didn't hear about CERTARA before, your company most likely already uses its technology or service. CERTARA has 1,650 customers across 61 countries. Even if it's less known in our space of biometrics, CERTARA is well known to your clinical, preclinical, and regulatory teams. This is a non-complete list of CERTARA software. So what is a biosimulation? It's computer-aided mathematical modeling of biological processes and systems to simulate and predict how the body affects the drug and how the drug affects the body. Basically, it's creation of virtual patients to conduct so-called in silico trials. What CERTARA is done, they created 25 different virtual patient populations and enable to model impact of compounds to different 10 body organs. This is amazing new technology with so much promises. The actual technology behind this is called SIM-CIP. CERTARA is known not only for SIM-CIP. They also very well known for the product called Phoenix Win Non-Lin. I'm sure that your PKPD folks most likely use it today. When people use non-compartmental analysis, toxicokinetics modeling or PK/PD modeling. Most likely they utilize Phoenix Wind on Lean, which, similar to Pinnacle 21, has a free version and started CERTARA as a commercial company. Wind on Lean is heavily utilized by researchers as well as reviewers. For example, if you look into Google Scholar, there are more than 34,000 citations of this technology. 17 regulatory agencies are current customers of CERTARA. Basically, every major agency in the world has adopted either SimSIP or Phoenix or both. These technologies are very valuable for agencies. They allow to either review submissions when it comes to PK/PD or utilize biosimulation to get new medicine to the market faster. Why these technologies are so popular to the pharma, biotech, and regulatory agencies? Because CERTARA is all about helping making crucial decisions. They're basically in the business of decision making to get the best outcome, such as go, no-go decisions for new candidate compounds, optimizing drug dosing for different populations, study design, or product labeling. In certain cases, CERTARA technology for in silico trials can even replace human clinical trials. Over time, this will become more and more popular, really saving you time and money in getting drug on the market. These decision-making technologies are so important that if you look at numbers since 2014, over 90% of new drug and biologic approvals by FDA were received by CERTARA customers. This is amazing achievement and speaks what they bring to the industry. So why Pinnacle 21 and CERTARA? This slide gives an answer why. I would summarize it in the following way. If you think why Pinnacle 21 was created, we started with open source rules, which were focused on helping programmers like ourselves to comply new CDISC standards. But when Pinnacle 21 was created 3 years later, it was really created as a part of FDA effort to create an Office of Computational Science as FDA effort to leverage a high quality standardized data to speed up key decisions in a regulatory review process. Pinnacle was really created, and we really see ourselves as a company which helps making decisions. So it's no surprise that we are interested in merging with other company which helps with other decisions in drug development process. If you look at benefits of standardized data, you can see recent amazing examples. In COVID-19 time, both Pfizer and Moderna vaccines were approved within just 18 days. It would not be possible without high quality standardized data. This is reinforcing importance of standards, data quality, and making decisions. As our combined company, we would like to drive standardization across entire drug development lifecycle. Why standardized data should be used only for submissions? Why do we still not utilize benefits of data standardization early in the processes? We believe that we should do all possible to make it possible to happen. We will work together to create integrated drug development platform which will connect all decision-making points by utilizing high-quality standardized data. It will also open a lot of opportunities or new use cases for advanced technologies, either machine learning or artificial intelligence. It's just not possible when you have dirty data. So we believe that it would be a game change for the industry. And finally, we have remarkable culture fit. We both have basically the same mission statement. Pinnacle was the best place to work for the last 3 years. CERTARA has also recently got the best place to work in New Jersey. So what to expect? At Pinnacle 21 as Pinnacle 21 customers, you will see very few changes, definitely in the short term. We remain 100% committed to our roadmaps for both enterprise and community solutions. Our roadmap is to push standardization upstream. This is completely unchanged. You should expect us to continue delivering what we set up to do. In the long term, while we are successfully pushing standards upstream, you should see better, cleaner, standardized data coming to you regardless of if it's coming from EDC or external vendors. Our goal is to ensure that standardization is happening upstream. Okay, it's time to move to a major part of the webinar. Controlled terminology. It's an important part of CDISC standards. It's critical in standard compliance, development of automated tools, and data integration. There are two major parts of any standard: structure, for example, SDTM, ADAM, or define.xml, and terminology, for example, MADRA or CDISC Controlled Terminology. CDISC Controlled Terminology includes non-extensible and extensible codelists. Despite continuous development and quarterly updates of CDISC terminology, there is still a need for study-specific extensions of standard codelists. There are special rules for valid extension of CDISC CT. Added terms should not be synonyms of existing standard terms. Splitting or merging standard terms is not allowed. New terms should represent correct type of information. Also, you need to ensure consistency of CT extension within your study and submission. Therefore, a good practice is to have centralized management of extended terminology within your company. It's recommended to submit requests to CDISC team for adding new terms to industry-wide standard terminology. For more details, please see our webinar on Controlled Terminology Best Practice by Sarah Angelo. It's available at Pinnacle 21 blog page. Unfortunately, extensions of standard terminology are often incorrect. Here is the industry matrix for the most common validation issues. CT 2002 non-standard term in extensible codelist is on the top. It's present in almost all studies with average issue rate 44%. Here are lists of top variables with CT 2002 issue. Lab test name is the most common case per percentage of studies where CT 2002 issue is reported, while our subject characteristics test name leads for percentage of extended terms. Some of you may ask, why do we need to explain our CT extensions if it's allowed by CDISC, and in most cases have already been documented in define.xml file. Similar, some users propose to downgrade CT 2002 rule from Pinnacle 21 warning to notice a message type. We cannot make any informed decisions without understanding the industry current implementation status for control terminology. Here are some questions we think the industry matrix can help to answer. What are common issues and their prevalence? What are the most common sources of problems? How can we improve validation? Are there any potential deficiencies in standards? What should good implementation practice focus on? Methodology. We decided to run a pilot project to test methodology and potential use of findings for improving standard management processes, including data validation. We have already done similar research about industry implementation of non-standard variables based on analysis of metrics for subqual datasets. The results were presented at Fuse Connect Europe conference in 2020. Based on our experience, we expected some analysis challenges due to presence of some non-standardized data and decided to analyze common problems in control terminology compliance by selecting some issues for detailed review. For our research, we utilized metrics collected by Pinnacle 21 Enterprise. We plan to analyze only tabulation data of clinical studies which are finalized or almost ready for regulatory submissions. Therefore, we selected only studies with the last validation performed in 2020. Those are also recent studies without legacy problems. Additional cleaning was performed. For example, studies with less than 16 datasets were excluded as not finalized data. Codelists with more than 40 terms per variable, with few exceptions, were excluded as data collected as a free text data entry. Plus some other stuff like obviously invalid validations or non-English data. Analyzed control terminology data represent implementation of 2,500 studies. More than 100,000 datasets, almost 500,000 of codelists, and 3.6 million total records of unique combination of term, variable, dataset, and study. The distribution of study phases is as expected and consistent with clinicaltrials.gov. The same with number of datasets in study and frequency of datasets. Results. Let's start with a race variable. Formally, CDISC controlled terminology codelist for this variable is non-extensible. However, 58% of our studies include additional terms for race. Term multiple is present in 28% studies. There are some variations of this extended term, such as mixed or biracial. Term other is present in 29% studies. There are also different granularities of these terms, such as other Asian. Term unknown and its variations, such as not reported, not permitted, are present in 14% studies. More granular race terms like Japanese, Maori, or Indian are present in 0.7% studies. However, please keep in mind that collected metrics is based on studies which were mostly prepared for FDA submissions. 1.5% studies include invalid synonyms of standard terms like Black, Caucasian, alternative spelling of standard terms, or incorrect character case. Also, a few studies have invalid information for race terms such as Hispanic, which represents ethnicity. This example of race variable represents some common issues in other variables. There are some cases when a term multiple may be needed to handle protocol-specific details. In studies with combinational drugs, investigators need to specify adverse event causality or action taken for each of combinational drug. Common implementation present in 16% of all studies is to use term multiple with details provided in subqual dataset. Another rarer implementation is to provide a reference to specific drug in term itself. For example, drug XYZ dose reduced. A problem with such extension of standard term is that it's invalid extension and action taken is non-extensible CDISC Controlled Terminology codelist. Another alternative implementation is to populate a missing value in SDTM variable like race with all details in sub-TM dataset for cases of other multiple or unknown race. All these implementations are potentially incorrect, confusing, and inconsistent. I believe that the industry needs help with it, like potentially adding term multiple to CDISC CT, having industry guidance, and adjusting validation. For example, some users populate a missing value instead of needed terms like multiple or other, simply to avoid validation messages. And this is not good practice. Term other is usually needed when data is collected as free text. SDTM implementation guide suggests several different options for mapping collected data to standardized format based on type of information and targeted analysis. So, in actual studies, you can find any examples of implementations. For example, value started with a term other, comma, and then collected data. Value is limited to term other with no additional details. Value is a term other with details in subqual datasets. Here are some metrics about presence of term other in studies. Concomitant medication dataset and variables location, dose frequency, and dose units are the most common cases present in a half of all studies. Another example of needed industry guidance or standard enhancement is AE action taken. This is non-extensible codelist, however, it looks like it does not work well for combinational drug studies. There are still other potential problems and incorrect implementation of this CT codelist, but their prevalence is not high. AE causality variable does not have standard control terminology. This fact introduced huge diversity in implementation. We found more than 100 unique terms utilized in this variable. Here is a list of most common terms. I believe it's time to create standard codelist for AE variable. We need it. Metrics for current implementation of terminology in AE causality variable may help with developing the industry standardized codelist. Another common case of extended term is the S-CD equal VS all. Such type of terms is utilized across findings domain when all schedule assessments were not done for subject visible. These terms are present in the vital sign domain of 37% studies, in LB domain of 35% studies, and in QS domain of 27% studies. The commonly used term is something like LB all in LB domain. However, we observed 51 additional terms synonyms in LB domain. Also, some studies have terms for more granular information like CAM all or LB all H with reference to specific lab panels such as chemistry or hematology. Similar in QS domain, it could be questionnaire specific terms. Like previous slides, I believe that industry needs help to ensure consistent standard implementation of such cases. Epoch variable is another example of common problem due to either deficiency in standard or lack of guidance. 53% studies have non-standard terms for epoch variable. In most cases, this is due to added numbers which represent different periods common for crossover studies or due to cycles in oncology studies. Of course, there are still some invalid extensions as well. Another common issue with implementation of standard terminology is submitting original units as collected raw data instead of conversion them to standard terms. Here is example for lab data. However, these numbers are misleading due to some limitation in methodology for our matrix prepared for analysis. As you can see, there is no big difference in statistics in usage of non-standard terms between the units for original results and units for standardized results. The problem is that not all studies provided input to matrix due to our cut-off limit for number of terms for variable. We have 2,507 studies with LB domain. 2,417 studies have codelists for LB standard result unit with less than 40 terms. So only these studies were included into our matrix for analysis. In contrast, only 1,976 studies contributed to matrix for LP original result variable. 21% studies which were not included have a lot of non-standard terms for LP original result units. Here are two examples from one of such studies. Glucose test results are presented by 2 terms for LP standard result unit and 14 terms for LP original result units. Basophil's results utilize 1 standard term for LP standard result units and 24 different terms for LP original result units. Expected approach is to convert collected data into standard terms during SDTM mapping process, similar you do for other data. In this example of basophil test results, only 3 different standard terms should be used instead of 23 non-standard terms. At Pinnacle 21, we consider enhancement of CT 2002 rule to report such cases as errors instead of warnings. Synonyms of standard terms are invalid extensions of standard terminology. Now let's talk about variables which need standard terminology. Substance use domain looks like a good candidate for this. In particular, its category variable. 80% studies with SU domain have SU category variable which include term nicotine. 53% SU domains utilize term alcohol. Other less common terms are drugs, caffeine, and special diet. Also, it looks like this type of data needs special units such as cigars or gum, or some other exotic units like lines, bump, joint, pinch, tin, etc. By the way, I think you have noticed incorrect spelling of term cigar in actual study data. It's just another reason to have standard controlled terminology here. Subject characteristics is the next example of deficiency in existing standard terminology. 97% studies with subject characteristics domain include extended terms for test variable. There are 179 or 4% records with standard terms versus 4,002 non-standard terms in our matrix data. or 1,177 unique SC test terms. Here are some examples. Term cohort present in 26% of SC domains, stratification 30%, female reproductive status 13%, protocol amendment number 18%. And again, there are always some invalid extensions like age at baseline. Let's talk about questionnaire data. CDISC terminology includes 210 code lists for different questionnaire with 12,000 standard terms based on QSTEST category, which represent the name of the question. However, if a value of QSTEST category is not populated by standard term, then value level validation for QSTEST or test CD variable will be skipped. Unfortunately, only 29% QSTEST category values are based on standard terminology. Here's an example for the most common questionnaire ECOG. A standard term is used in 423 studies. However, there are another 622 studies with ECOG text in QSTEST category variable. There are some other invalid synonyms for name of this questionnaire. Please note that it's a challenge to analyze large data which is not fully standardized because it's a manual process. Something may be missed here, so our numbers may be underestimated. Now let's talk about something simple like CT 2002 issues in vital signs domain. 42% studies have CD extensions for VS tests. If we ignore already discussed VS all cases, this number is reduced to 10%. For them, about 60% reported validation issues are incorrect CD extensions. For example, age at visit, baseline weight, blood pressure, or ECOG performance status. 14% studies have extensions for VS standard result units. And again, most extensions are invalid. Some terms need to be added to CDISC terminology like kilopascals for PMDA submissions. Rule CT 2003 is about consistency in usage of CDISC controlled terminology. It requires to have the same NCI code for code and name variables of the same standard test. Common invalid explanation for this issue in reviewer's guide is extensible controlled terminology. However, CT 2003 is always mapping or programming error. Here is example of non-standard terms for VS test when VS test CD equal BMI. Correct value of body mass index is populated in 98% studies. Invalid terms were synonyms of standard terms, included additional qualifiers, or represented different tests or different information. In the last two examples, it's not clear what information is correct, represented by test code or test name variables. Is it BMI or weight? Here is a CT 2003 example for LB test CD variables. Note that in some cases, like rheumatoid factor test, it could be due to inconsistency in CDISC terminology standards across versions. Therefore, please ensure that you use the same version of CDISC terminology across all terms, variables, and domains in your study. we highly recommend utilization of the most recent version of CDISC terminology. Consistency of versions across studies within your submission are highly useful for integration, and it's required by Japanese agency. Let's summarize our findings. The industry metrics can help to identify, diagnose, and measure implementation issues. However, such metrics should be carefully designed to avoid misinterpretations. Cleaning of collected metrics is important. It is difficult to perform a manual analysis of large amount of data. Major limitations for metric automation are unexpected violation of standards, ongoing studies, and free text data entry. Our pilot study shows that invalid extension of CDISC terminology is still a common implementation issue, which requires global educational efforts to promote good control terminology mapping practice, as well as good clinical data management practice. Some control terminology issues may be resolved only by good data collection design, which supports our CDISC, SDTM, and terminology standards. Further enhancement of CDISC terminology and development of related guidance documentation are expected. Validation of CDISC terminology is still needed to help with its correct implementation. Further enhancement of validation are expected to provide better diagnostics, produce more accurate results, and add new functionality. Thank you very much for your attention. Now it's time for your question. I still have some time to cover a few of your questions. The rest of them will be addressed at Pinnacle 21 blog, where we will publish our slides and recording of this webinar. I think slides will be available on Pinnacle 21 webpage within a week. It may take extra time for answering all your questions. We will notify you. Okay, I see many questions about Pinnacle 21 and CERTARA. Let's start with them. Is Pinnacle 21 going to change its name after merging to CERTARA? No. To avoid potential confusion, we will use our Pinnacle 21 name and existing brand. Definitely in the short term. We are a member of CERTARA family, something like CERTARA Pinnacle 21, similar to other products such as Google Android or Adobe Acrobat. What is the role of Pinnacle 21 in CERTARA? Okay, I will try to make my answer short and clear in this way. Max Kanevsky, a founder of Pinnacle 21, is now Chief Technology Officer at CERTARA. Similar to his major role at Pinnacle 21, he will lead product development and implementation process at CERTARA. I mean that Max will be responsible for all technology solutions at CERTARA. What are CERTARA plans for Pin21 community? As I already said before in my presentation, there are no changes in Pinnacle 21 roadmap for both community and enterprise. P21 community is still our strategic technology solution. We believe that it provides a lot of value for the industry and helps many companies with preparation study data for regulatory submissions. Right now, we're working on a new release of community, which will be available in early 2022. In short, and again, there are no changes. Next question, is your raw matrix data available? Can you share it? No, we cannot share raw matrix data. However, our enterprise clients can get it for their own company. We have a special new project for this. Please contact Pinnacle Customer Success Group for details. Next questions are finally about control terminology. Do I have to use the same version of control terminology for all studies in my submission? For PMDA submission, it's a formal requirement. You need to have everything consistent within your submission, including potential resubmission of your data during review process. It means the same version of the standards, including control terminology, and even the same version of validation engine. For PMDA submissions, it's recommended rather than required. We also highly recommend utilizing the same version of standards as much as possible. Consistency can simplify many tasks, especially data integration. Why is CT 2002 assigned to original units variables? Should not standardization be done on the standard units variable? Please refer to CDISC SDTM implementation guide. This is a formal requirement from CDISC, and we are completely agree with them. It's like a whole SDTM mapping process. You do not submit other raw data as collected. Why original units should be different? Next question, if I have an older study using older version of CT, should I up version it? The answer is it depends. For example, for PMDA submissions, you do not have a choice. All studies must have the same version of CT. For PMDA submissions, I would recommend to create your study data standardization plan and discuss with your FDA reviewers. Keeping original version of control terminology may be beneficial to ensure that reviewers can reproduce the results consistent with your clinical study reports. Having the same recent version of control terminology across all studies will simplify data integration and meta-analysis. So please communicate with your FDA reviewers in advance about their preferences. Related question, does P21 Enterprise support historical or legacy versions of CT dictionaries so that I can compare my older studies against CT that was available at that time? Yes, we support all versions of CDISC control terminology, which are supported by regulatory agencies, but I'm not sure how that will help, in your case. If I cannot fix the CT 2002 issue in my study, it's very annoying to add an explanation for each CT 2002 issues. Is there a faster or more efficient way to handle this? Sometimes you can combine explanations for the same issue across domains. For example, extension of CDISC CT for epoch variable. In P21 Enterprise, we have some productivity tools and functionality which may help. However, in general, you should not have many CT 2002 issues in your study. Standardization should start with data collection process. Another potential solution is to introduce company-specific control terminology which can be used for validation in addition to CDISC control terminology. In this way, you will filter out all validation messages related to your company approved extension of standard control terminology, please contact P21 customer success team for details. And I think I will answer another 2 questions before closing this session. There is usually a long lag time between when the industry submits a new term to CDISC and when CDISC actually adds that term to the control terminology. What should we do during this long waiting period? I believe it's okay to have company or study-specific extensions of control terminology until 2 important criteria are met. First, your extensions should be valid, and feedback from CDISC may be helpful. There are many requested new terms which were rejected for different reasons. Anyway, you should try your best. Second, you need to ensure consistency of your extensions within your submission or all studies in your company. So you don't need to wait, just continue doing your work to get new medicine on the market as fast as possible. And the last related question, is there any way P21 Enterprise can be used to facilitate, expedite reporting of new control terminology to CDISC? Yes, we can provide your company metrics, including control terminology. Also, you can use Enterprise for managing and enforcing your company specific standards. With that answer, I hope I provide some useful information for you. If you have any follow-up questions, you can reach us on our forum or send email. We will put webinar slides, recording, and answer to all your questions on our blog page as we always did before. Thank you guys for joining us again. Please watch out for additional announcement about new educational webinars later this year and during the next year. Thank you once again for your support, and we are looking forward to present something again in the nearest future. Bye. Have a good day.